Daf Yomi is on today, Samach Hamad Beis, at the Mishnah in the middle of the page. Interesting new material, which has very practical ramifications in halacha for kashrus. So Mishnah says, Yain nesach shenafal al gabe anavim. If you have yain nesach, which is prohibited, and that falls onto grapes, so then all you have to do is yadichon vehin mutaros. You just have to wash it off. Right? Prohibited material gets washed off and everything is fine. Vim hayu mevukaos, but if the grapes had some sort of splits or openings in the skin, which I think the Yerushalmi even comments that if the stems are removed, right? So even the top is the hole in the top, right? Then asuros, then they become prohibited because some of the liquid from the yayin nesach gets into the grape, gets absorbed into the grape. Nafal al gabe te'enim o al gabe tamarim. If the yayin nesach falls onto figs or dates, so in yesh behem benosein tam, if the yayin nesach gives a flavoring to the dates or the figs because they are absorbent, so then usr, then they would be prohibited. Now in practice, nosein tam, right, the amount that it takes to give flavor, this is where the number 1/60th comes from, right? That in practice, you really can't always do an evaluation. I guess you find a non-Jew or somebody who can taste it for you and find out. We go with a 1 to 60 ratio when we talk about nosein tam in practice. Okay? Ma'aseh Beitus ben Zonon. There was a story that happened with Beitus ben Zonon. Shehevi grogros basvina. He brought dried figs onto a boat. V'nishtabra chavesh shel yain nesach. And a barrel of yain nesach broke, v'nafal al gabehan, and it fell onto them. V'shal chachamim, and they asked the chachamim, what do we do about it? V'hetiru, and they said it was fine. This is the rule. Kol shebehan aso benosein tam aser. Anything, right, that if you would benefit from the taste of the item, right, that the benefit is if it gives any sort of a flavor, so then it's prohibited to eat that, right? You can't eat the permissible if it gives a flavor. The kol she'ein ben hanaso benosein tam, if there is something it doesn't give any of the flavor, the prohibited flavor over to the permitted item, so then it's mutter. Then that's fine. Kigon chometz shenafal al gabe grisin. For example, if you have vinegar that falls onto beans. Okay, so then the flavor does not benefit the beans. I should have said that this is the call is kol shebehan nosein tam, kol shebehan naso benosein tam. If it gives benefit in giving its flavor, that's what this means, right? If the flavor is beneficial, so then it prohibits the item. If the flavor is not beneficial, right, nosein tam lifgam we call it, right? If it gives a non-beneficial flavor, so then it's permissible. And the example is, for example, vinegar that falls onto beans. So then the vinegary flavor is going to fall onto the beans, and that's not good. And so therefore, that is going to be permissible. Okay, says the Gemara. Maisa listor. You've got a story of Beitus ben Zonon that goes against what the first part of the Mishnah says. First part of the Mishnah says that if the wine falls onto the te'enim or the tamarim, the figs or the dates, then it's going to be prohibited. Then comes a story, and he had dried figs, and all the wine fell on it, and they said, yeah, no problem. So how does the story support this previous statement? The story seems to be against the statement. So the answer is, chisuri mechzera, there's a piece missing in the Mishnah that explains it. V'hachi kitani, here's how you have to learn the Mishnah. Im nosein tam lifgam hu mutter. If it gives a bad flavoring, right, that's what was missing in the Mishnah. If it gives a bad flavoring, so then it's permissible. U'maisa nami b'baitus ben zonon. That was what happened with Baitus ben Zonon. Shahaya mevi grogros besvina. He was bringing dried figs in a boat. V'nishtabra chavis shel yain nesach. And then the barrel of yain nesach wine broke. V'nafal gabehem, and the wine poured all over the figs. Uba ma'isa lifnei chachamim v'hetirum, and then the chachamim said that was permissible because the wine flavor was not beneficial for the dried figs, and so therefore that's why it was permitted. Nosein tam lifgam. Hahu kari dechiti denafal aleha chavisa diyayin nesach. There was once a pile of wheat that fell upon it was fallen upon it, a barrel of wine of yayin nesach fell upon that wheat. Sharye Rava lizvunei l'ovdei kochavim. So Rava made it permissible. He said it's okay to sell it to avoros kochavim. That they're only prohibited. You're not allowed to eat it, but it's not going to be aser behana like the yayin nesach. So Esvei Rava bar Livoy l'Rava. So Rava bar Livoy asked Rava the following question: Beged she'avad bo kil'ayim. Let's say you have clothing, and within this clothing got mixed in some shatnez, right? So wool and linen got mixed together in it, and you don't know exactly where in the weaving process that occurred. So you can't just remove it. So hareze lo yim karena lo oved kochavim. You're not allowed to get any benefit from it. You're not allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. V'lo yasena mardas lechamor. You can't even make it a blanket for a donkey, right? Which normally you wouldn't have any prohibition of kilayim on a blanket for a donkey. They're stiff and they don't, even though we say that you're not allowed to have shatnez in a cushion that you'd sit on because the cushion could, wrap around you and then it could bring coverage and you'll get hana from it. Normally with a blanket for a donkey, not. But we say that you cannot use this for anything. Also tachrich l'meis mitzvah. However, the thing that you can use it for is you can use it for burial shrouds for a meis mitzvah, right? Because a dead body does not have to worry about the averos of shabbos. So la'oved kochavim my time alo. So what's the reason why you can't sell this item, this shatnez garment, to a non-Jew? Dilma asi lizvunei liyisrael. The answer is because you might resell it to a Jew. Right, that's the problem. So therefore, hachanami. So here too, the wheat, right? You permitted the wheat; it's going to get sold to a non-Jew, and then the non-Jew might sell it back to a Jew, and he won't know that it's mixed together with yayin nesach, and then he'll eat it. So asi lizvunei liyisrael. So he's going to come and he's going to sell it to a Jew. So hadar shara lemitchinhu ulemafinhu. So what he did was instead he said, okay, here's what will be permissible. You'll permit it to grind it up and to bake it, and then you could sell it to non-Jews with no Jews present. Why? Because if you do that, then no Jew is going to buy baked bread from a non-Jew because of Bishul Akum, right? Also Pas Yisrael, those kinds of prohibitions. So therefore, nobody would. Now, if a Jew is present at the sale, so then somebody would say, hey, it was kosher bread. It was baked by a Jew. This non-Jew just bought it, so now we can buy it back. Right. They're not going to know about the problem of the yayin nesach. But by grinding it up, and now you've created a circumstance where the Jew is not getting any hana from the yayin nesach, right? Because he's not selling it for the price of the wheat plus the yayin nesach. So that takes care of the hana problem there. As far as eating it, you don't have a problem because you're giving it to a non-Jew. And as far as worrying about him reselling it to a non-Jew, reselling it back to a Jew, you have created a circumstance whereby no Jew would buy it back from him because you've made it into bread. Okay, so that was their clever solution to that problem. Tonight, we're in the Mishnah. Yayin nesach shenafal agabe anavim yadichan vehein mutaros. Our Mishnah says that if yayin nesach falls onto grapes, all you need to do is wash them, and they become permissible. So if they are cracked and they're open, so then asuros, so then they're prohibited. So he said to him, mevukos in, shem mevukos lo. So he says, if they're not cracked open, so then why didn't they just wash the wheat off, and they could have used it fine, right? There wouldn't have been any prohibitions. Why were they so worried about this wheat that they couldn't, because it absorbed the yayin nesach? So I'm a Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, Shani chiti, wheat is different. Hol ve'agav tziraihu k'mevukos damyon. They've got a crack in the side of the kernel, and so therefore they do absorb. And so therefore there's really no way for wheat to simply get washed off. It's not like a grape. Grape has a nice skin on it to be able to prevent it from getting in. Wheat is not like this. They had to assume that the wine got absorbed. That's why they had to come up with this creative solution. Okay, Samach Vav Amid Aleph. Chamra Atika, if you've got old wine, be'anve, with grapes, that gets mixed into with grapes, divrei hakol benosein tam, so then everyone agrees that the grapes are not prohibited, unless the flavor is noticeable in them. You need to be able to notice the flavor. Chamra chadata be'anvi. Now, if you have new wine with grapes, so then Abai Amar b'mashehu. Abai says even the slightest amount is going to prohibit it, right? The Rava Amar b'nosein tam. Rava says no, it still needs a nosein tam in a certain amount. Okay, so explanation of this machlokas. Abai Amar b'mashu. Abai says even the slightest amount because basar ta'amon azlinon. He says you have to go by flavor here, right? You have two different types of mixtures. You have a mixture of min b'mino and you have a mixture of min shebe'eno mino. Min b'mino means two items of the same type. If you have two items of the same type and you get the prohibited mixed into the same type, so then even the slightest amount is going to prohibit the entire mixture.
Right.
If, however, the two are distinct, then we're going to go by nosein tam. We're going to go by whether it gives taste. So the question is, if you've got old wine and you've got grapes, so those are clearly two different things. The flavors are different. The wine and the grapes are different. Those are clearly different. So therefore, you're going to go by nosein tam. That they agree with. The question is, now I've got grape juice, new wine, right? So now it gets mixed into the grapes. And the grape juice is prohibited. So Abaye says that you're going to go by the taste, right? Rabbi is going to say b'mashu the slightest amount, because why? Basar tam azlina. We're going to go by taste. Are grapes and grape juice the same thing? The answer is yes. Why? Because grapes and grape juice have the same flavor. So therefore, that's correct. They haven't fermented yet. So therefore, since they have the same flavor, they're the same thing. And so therefore, when the grape juice gets poured onto the grapes, assuming it penetrates into the grape, we're going to go by nosein tam. We're going to go by, b'mashu. We're going to go by the slightest amount is going to prohibit the grapes, and that's that. So since idi ve'idi chad taimahu, since both the grapes and the grape juice are the same flavor, so then dehava le min b'mino, it's going to be considered to be two items of the same type, min b'mino b'mashu, and the prohibition of a mixture, if you have two items of the same type, is even the slightest drop, the slightest amount is going to prohibit it. The Rava Amar Rava says, he says b'nosein tam, we're going to have a flavor of this grape juice in it, because basar shema azlinon, we go by the name. There's a difference between grape juice and grapes. V'hai shema luchud, v'hai shema luchud. Each of these items, anavim and yayin, grapes and wine, are not the same thing. So therefore, you have to say these are two different items. V'havale min b'she'eno mino. You have to look at it as though these are two different items mixing together. Min b'she'eno mino b'nosein tam. And when you have two items that are not the same, you have to see if flavor was imparted in order for... Now, you're not going to say, how are you going to impart flavor? They do taste the same, right? The answer is 1/60th. So that's where you have to be able to measure your 1/60th. If you've got a ratio of 1/60th grape juice to prohibited grape juice to 60 measures of permissible grape, then that's where you would be, that's where you're going to be prohibited, right? And less than that mixture is okay.
Sounds like a bias is about making sure that the tam is just a note whether or not the taste actually that wine actually got through. Whereas a bias about, so Rav is about hana. Like, if you can't get hana from it, then what is it? It's not, is that the difference? Basically, in their...
I don't know that. I mean, the question is the original items in the first place, whether those are the same items or different items. Right. Okay. Once they're the same, then they have one set of rules. Once they are different, they have a different set of rules.
Right, but not Rava. Rava says it doesn't seem to.
Rava says they are different items. Right. He says these are grapes. This is wine.
But he still holds by batal b'shisha.
But he does hold batal b'shisha, but only if the two items are since the two items are different items.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Right? He's not saying they're the same. Right. Okay. Fine.
Okay. So, Tanan, our Mishnah says, Yayin nesach shenaf al gabei arnavim. Our Mishnah talks about yayin nesach that falls onto some grapes, right? And it says that you can wash them off. So, kasalka daitach. So it says, but if there's a crack, then it's prohibited. So we think that chamra chadata b'invi. So you're suggesting that this is new wine onto grapes. So, right, because we're asking on Abaye. Abaye seems to suggest that you have to, right, if the Mishnah had said, right, the Mishnah had said, if they were open, so then they are asuros, they're prohibited, right? So then we're going to have to be able to see prohibited, and so the question is on Abaye, right?
No question be on Rava, no?
That's what I'm wondering. Hang on a second.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. This is where it would make sense.
You're gonna have to worry about.
That light's going nuts.
Yeah, I know.
Disco.
It's probably on a site dimmer or something, and that's why it's getting a little electricity and then not enough and flickers on and off. Anyway, now, so it sounds like the Mishnah is suggesting the prohibition, even though the Mishnah is not clear like this, right? The Mishnah says that if it gives flavor, right, then it's going to prohibit it.
According to Rava.
Which is Rava's opinion.
Right.
The Mishnah says that, so that's why this is a question of Abaye.
Which is what I'm saying. It must be Hana, because at that point, for sure, it's gotten into your grape when it's open, right? So his
So
thing would
the issue
be
is only whether
if there's Hana.
But Hana'ah. The issue, the question you're saying is, there's taste.
Right.
Rav and Abaye agree that if the item is the same item, then taste is not relevant.
Right.
Right? So therefore the issue isn't that they argue about whether mixtures are prohibited or permitted with Hana or not with Hana. Because it's not really relevant. A particular mixture, you could be getting flavor or you could not be getting flavor. The issue is whether flavor is the most important issue. Right? The name of the item, the fact that it's a different item, takes priority. It's not a Hana issue.
No, but like, what are they leaning on to be able to distinguish that? And one's saying tam, but like the only way you could do it is if you can get benefit from it. And whereas
but you're adding benefit in.
Where Rabbi is saying even if.
But why?
Even a mushroom, even a small little.
But only with regards to items that are the same.
Right, but
Rava agrees with that. Rava agrees and says yes, items that are the same. I agree with you.
Right, but the way they distinguish it.
But the way they distinguish it is different. But therefore, the argument isn't about whether you can get Hana or whether you can't get Hana. The argument is what distinguishes two items, whether two items are the same or they're different.
Yeah, I hear. Okay. Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Right? Are these items the same or are they not? We agree if they are the same. Right. We agree if they are different. The question is, are they the same or are they different? Right. That's the only issue. So we're looking at this, we're presuming that the Mishnah is talking about new wine, that is yain asech, that falls on the grapes. And my lav ben no same time, then it says that you have to wash them off. If it breaks into the middle of the grape, it gets into the grape, they're prohibited. Doesn't that imply that the Mishnah is, we're presuming the Mishnah is saying, a lot of presumptions, right? We presumed it was new wine, then we presumed it was also giving some sort of flavor. The answer Abaye would give is lo b'masha. That's what was troubling me is why did you presume the Mishnah says that? The Mishnah does not say that. The Mishnah could even be a mashu, right? Even the slightest amount. So now, the problem is, Hamidi Ketani Seifa, the next part says, Zehaklal, here's the rule. Kol shebeha naso benosein tam aser, kol she'ein beha naso benosein tam mutter. That means the rule of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah says, here's the generality, the general rule is that if it gives a flavor, it's prohibited. If it doesn't give a flavor, it's permitted. We call the benosein tam askinon. So that means that the whole Mishnah, this is the part that was bothering me, but this is the explanation. The whole Mishnah is talking about giving flavor. That's even the beginning when it says the wine got poured on, it must be talking about giving flavor. And so if it's talking about giving flavor, so Abaye masnisim bechamratika be'anvi. So Abaye says, okay, well, if it's going to be talking about flavor, then it must be old wine that fell in the grapes. Because if it was old wine, then I agree with you. Then it's two different items, and then I agree with you, it has to give a flavor. So the Mishnah doesn't prove anything. Okay, now, chala de chamra v'chala de shichra. If you've got vinegar that comes from wine, or you've got vinegar that comes from beer, right? I guess it could over-ferment either way. And so, right, it's basically, it's vinegar that's going to come from over-fermentation of grapes versus vinegar that comes from over-fermentation of barley, right? That's the difference. So, Abaye Omer, benosein tam. Abaye says you have to go by nosei tam, being able to give a flavor. Rava Amar b'mashu, Rava says that it's any amount. Here they reverse their viewpoints. Why? Because Amar Abaye says b'nosei tam basar tam azlinon, saying we're going by the flavor, right? Vinegar tastes like vinegar. So wine vinegar and beer vinegar taste like vinegar. So therefore, they're the same item. So therefore, since it should be a v'had time l'chud. Sorry, we go by flavor, and it's not the same flavor. I said it wrong. Basar time azlinon v'had time l'chud. Wine vinegar and beer vinegar taste different.
Okay, so now I understand the difference.
Right.
Abaye is species. Rava's species.
Right.
No, Rava's actual what it is. Vinegar doesn't matter what it's made of.
That's exactly right. Yes. So v'havale min b'she'eno mino. So therefore, these are two different types, two different flavors. Therefore, they're two different items. Min b'she'eno mino b'nosein tam. So therefore, these are two different items, and therefore it goes by whether it imparts flavor or not. The Rava will say b'mashu, the slightest amount. Basar shema azlina, we're going to go by the name. By chala mikri, v'hai chala mikri. They're both vinegar, right? Vinegar and vinegar. Even though they're different tasting vinegars, it's irrelevant. Therefore, we're going to it's going to be vinegar, and we're going to prohibit it in the smallest amount. Yeah, no, that didn't help. Okay. V'hai chamira mikri, v'hai chamira mikri. So v'havale min b'mino. So, after all, at the end of the day, this is called. But in the wine case, right? The old wine, the new wine. Why is it that he disagreed there? And he said old wine and new wine are different things, right? So he says v'havale min b'mino. They're both called wine. So if they mix together, v'chol min b'mino b'mashahu. So they are going to be prohibited even the smallest amount. So Abaye says. Did I explain that right? I don't know if I did. Hang on one second. No, this is chamira is chametz. This is talking about chametz. Chamira, like we say on kol chamira v'chamia, right? It says not chamra, it's chamira. So this is the chamira. So if you have this leavening agent, right? They would have like a sourdough type of activator. That was how they made their dough. So if they had this activator and it was made from wheat, right? And then you had another one that was made from barley, right? So then they have the same name. So havale min b'mino, they are the same type, and chol min b'mino b'mashahu. So if they mix together, they're also going to prohibit an item in the smallest amount as well.
That's going to Rava.
According to Rava, correct. That's going to be consistent. Abaye is going to say what he talked about. Right. He's going to say that nosei tam is going to go by flavor. Okay, so now. Amar, so Abaye now gives his source. You want to know where does he get it from? So Abaye's source is as follows: that you're going to go based on when you consider two items, two different things based on flavor. Abaye says, "Mino lo debasar time azlina." How do I know that you're going to go after flavor? Detanya when brisa tavlin beis v'gimel shemos v'hein miyad echad. If you've got two or three different types of spices, okay. But they're all basically one thing, spices, right? So you've got some oregano and some different things, and you have them all mixed together, right? I take that back. Three different spices of the same name would be black pepper, white pepper, and long pepper. I think the art school has a third. I need to know, like, where do you have three different types? And he says black pepper, white pepper, and long pepper. So they're all pepper family, right? They all have slightly, right? So they have three different names, but they're all from one species. Min gimel, or they're from three different species. Asurin, they're prohibited, right? If you mix them together in the prohibited amounts into your cooked item. Umitztarfin, and they combine together, even though they're three different distinct items. They combine together to create the prohibition in the cooked item. V'amar Chizkiah, and Chizkiah says, "Hacham b'minei mitika askinon." right? This we're talking about sweeteners, not like we said by pepper, for example. The sweeteners, you have, I don't know, 3 different types of sweeteners, and you mix them together. Hol v'ruyin lematek bahen esa kedera. Since they sweeten up the pot, all of them, they're all going to combine together. Now, says Rabbi, Imar bishal basar time mazlino, and if you're going to tell me, if you're going to go by flavor, so kule chad time, they're all sweeteners. Therefore, they're all giving the same flavor. That's why you're going to combine all these 3 things, these 3 different ingredients together. Right? Ella Imar basar shema mazlino, if you're going to go by the name, and one is stevia, and one is NutraSweet, and one is sugar, right? So Hayshema L'chud, V'Hayshema L'chud, they're all different names. So then, why should they combine? They don't combine together, right? So therefore, that makes sense. But Rava is going to say to you, no, there are 3 different names. They still have to combine. So how come? Ha-money, who's this? This Mishnah is a unique opinion. Ha-money, it's Rabbi Meir. It's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Meir has a unique opinion that he holds that all prohibited items combine together, regardless of name, taste, anything. He just says, if you've got this half of a prohibited item and this half of a prohibited item, you eat half a kazayas of chametz and half a kazayas of nevela on Pesach, then you are going to be punished for eating maichalos asuros. Right? You're eating prohibited food items, despite that they have no connection to each other. Right? So he says, Ditanya, we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi says, Nishum Rabbi Meir, in the name of Rabbi Meir, Minayin lekol isun shebator shemitztarfen zeh and zeh. How do I know that all prohibitions in the Torah combine together? Shenemar, the pasuk says, "Lo tochal kol to'eva." You should not eat any disgrace or any disgusting item. So, bechol sheti'avti loch, anything that I made disgraceful to you, anything that Hashem says I declared not kosher, harehu bebal tochel, becomes in this generalized prohibition, don't eat. Now that it's all in one prohibition, all prohibited items can combine together. So Abai says that this Mishnah isn't talking, according to Rabbi Meir, it's going to everybody. And so therefore, since they all have the same flavor, that's why they're combining. Rava says, no. According to nobody, these things shouldn't combine. They have different names. They shouldn't combine. But according to Rabbi Meir, he just combines everything, right? So therefore, since Rabbi Meir, right, he says it combines everything, that's why this Mishnah doesn't prove anything according to Rava. Okay, so that's their...
How did Abai hold in this?
Abaye wanted to say that since they all had the same sweetening flavor, they were all able to combine.
And Rava said because they all have the same name, they
shouldn't combine.
Right.
But why do they combine? Because this Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir, who combines everything. Right? It's like Mikey, right? He combines everything. So anyway, it's an old reference. It's a commercial. Wheaton, something, whatever. Life cereal. Sorry. Look it up. Those at home. Okay, so now, let's say we had vinegar into vinegar. So then, divrei akol b'nosein tam. So everyone is going to agree that it has to impart some kind of a flavor, right? Even in the smallest amount. So, that's chamra. Sorry, I said it wrong. Chala legav chamra. If vinegar falls into wine, right, then that's 2 different items. Everyone's going to agree it's b'nosein tam, right? Vinegar and wine are 2 different items. Chamra legochala. But if wine falls into vinegar, then we have an argument. Abai yamar b'mashu. Abai says even in the smallest amount, because he must be holding this. That we're going to see the taste becomes the same. As he's going to explain that once when you're pouring wine into vinegar, so then as the wine comes close to the vinegar, it vinegarizes in some sort of a way.
Right.
And so therefore it becomes mixed together. As when it mixes together, it's the same item. Therefore, min b'mino b'mashahu. And no Saint Tom, Rava says no, it's got to give flavor, right? Because it's not.
I thought it was because the vinegar poured in the wine and made it worse. There shouldn't be even a shiloh. We said before it had to make it more.
Well, the wine
better.
is going into the vinegar, right?
Right. No, that case for sure. But the other case isn't it just because if vinegar fell into wine,
that's interesting because he does say chala legav chamra is benosein tam. I guess it should be permitted altogether because it gives a negative taste. That's a good point.
Right. You'll definitely taste it.
I have to think about that. I don't know why that isn't an answer.
Right.
Right. But they don't say that. I'm going to think about that. Good question.
What if someone enjoys the flavor?
right? Maybe that would be a potential answer. But I don't think anybody
No,
likes
I
any
know.
vinegar in their wine.
No, I know. But there are weird.
But if there are weird people, so
Yeah.
the general rule with the Gemara and weird people is that we go based on the majority, right? The way that most normal people would be. If you've got one crazy person who enjoys something in a wacky way, right? And one guy, we're going to be talking about spoiled food and things. If one guy enjoys spoiled food, that isn't going to change the halacha for anybody. Exactly. Rava Amar benosin tam. Rava is going to say that it has to give a flavor. Abaye Amar b'mashu. Abaye says it gives in the smallest amounts. Samach vav on the base because reiche chala. Because the smell when the wine gets close to the vinegar's smell takes over the wine's smell. So now we're going to introduce something new, smell to the equation. And he says v'tama chamra chala. So therefore, the wine begins to taste like vinegar once it smells like vinegar. Okay? So v'havale min b'mino, so it becomes the same item. We call min b'mino b'mashu. Therefore, since the smell overtakes the taste, it becomes the same item. Therefore, it's min b'mino, and it gets prohibited in the smallest amount. Rava says, b'nosin tam, when it gives a flavor. Why? Because reiche chala v'tama chamra. Right? Its smell is smell of vinegar, but it still tastes like wine. Right? So therefore, it's still chamra. So therefore, it's still wine getting mixed into the vinegar. Min mino. So he holds that this is min mino. Now, even though he normally says they'd be considered two separate items based on name by itself, not just based on flavor or such, but it seems like this enters into the equation here. Whether the wine actually becomes vinegar is very important, because if it becomes vinegar, then it is vinegar, then he would agree that it would be b'mashu. But he's suggesting, no, it stays wine. It tastes like wine despite smelling like vinegar. V'kol min b'she'eno mino b'nosein tam, it's going to have to impart some kind of a flavor. Okay, so that's their argument. Hai bas tiha ove kochavim be de Yisrael. There was bas in there's a bas tiha where they poke a hole in the cover of the wine barrel in order to smell it, in order to be able to see if the wine is good or not. And now various Mefarshim explain how this thing worked, right? Either it was just that they would smell it, or whether they would actually inhale the fumes and into their palates and be able to taste the wine without not actually touching the wine. This is important for the Yayin Nesach part of this. It was done by a non-Jew, but it wasn't ever touched, right? They had this flask, it was a straw that had holes in it, so that they could suck up the fumes and the smell of it, but not the wine itself.
Right.
Okay, so that's what's going on here. So now, Oved kachavim b'di Yisrael, if a non-Jew does this to a Jew's wine, shopir dummy, it's fine, because the non-Jew doesn't touch the wine at all. Yisrael b'di oved kachavim, but if a Jew does it to a non-Jew's wine, Abaye Amar Aser, Abaye says that's prohibited, and Rava Amar Mutter, Rava is going to say that's permitted. So Abaye Amar Aser, Recha Milsahi. Abaye is the one before, when it came to the wine and the vinegar, says that the smell was very important and relevant. So therefore he says that if you're inhaling the smell, right, then that's going to be significant, and that's prohibited. You can't get benefit from the Yayin Nesach. So the smelling of the non-kosher of the Yayin Nesach is prohibited, therefore that's no good. Rava Amar Mutter, Rava says, nope, it's fine, because Recha Lav Milsa, smell is not anything. Smell is not the same thing. Amar Rava says, Mina law derecha velo klum. I'll show you a proof where I get my idea from that smell is nothing. Ditnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Tanor she'siku bikamon shel truma. Let's say a oven was warmed up. A Kohen came along, he was warming up his oven. He used some cumin, which I guess is a spice, but it probably has logs or whatever, right?
Good spice.
Right?
Yeah, you use it in a lot of Indian food.
That's
really,
right.
really good. Yeah.
And you put it, I guess they had branches of it or whatever. They used this in order to, so it was a food, but they used it to warm up their oven, which gave the oven a nice cuminy flavor and smell. Okay? But it was truma. A Kohen can use that, right? He can bake his bread in truma, smell, and that would be fine. But now, v'ava boas hapas, here comes a non-Kohen, and he bakes his bread in this oven, and it has the truma smell. So the question is the bread contaminated with the truma? After all, it gives a smell, right? So hapas muteres, the bread is fine, Lefisha ein tam kamon elo recha kamon. It's not the flavor of cumin that you get into the bread; it's the smell that gets absorbed into the bread by baking it in that oven. So therefore, and that there's no argument on that. So therefore, Rava says, "There's my proof. The smell gets absorbed into the bread. It's not, but it's not truma." So Abaye says, "Shani hosam." That's different. The mikla isurei, the original prohibited item, is gone. There's a difference, he says, between smell when the item that you're smelling exists, and the smell when the item that you're smelling does not any longer exist. Right? Match them. Right? When I take a barrel of wine and I use this sniffer thing and I smell it, there's wine
that
here.
exists.
I'm smelling this wine. There's a connection between this flavor of the smell that I'm getting and this wine. When I take the cumin and I burn it up, and now there's no cumin here anymore because it's completely burned up, and all that's left is the smoky smell of the cumin, that's not a thing. That smell is not relevant because it's not connected to any real item. You're no longer smelling the real item. That's why that smell is nothing.
Right.
But a smell for an item that you're literally smelling right now that exists is something. Amar Rav Mari, so Rav Mari says, Kitanai, maybe that discussion is a machlokas tanai. Harode paschama, if somebody is removing hot bread, the way that they used to make their bread is they would take their stoves and they would take the dough and stick it into the inside of the oven against the inside side of the oven.
Like
right?
the lafas?
Like the
Right,
lafas.
you see
exactly.
it, probably lafas,
That's
yeah.
Is that how they do it? Do you see
Yeah,
it?
you see them throw it and sticks to the
Throw
wall.
it, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, I got to see that because that's exactly what this is, right? So they would take it, they'd stick it onto their hot oven, right?
That's a tanur, right? Or a tanur?
Yeah, they would have a tanur, right? They would have a tanur. The akira and a tanur are the two different types. One is a double oven and one is a single oven, but that's how they would do it, right? So when they take it off, v'nosna al pi chavis shel yayin. Now, it's hot bread. They take it out of the oven and they put it onto a barrel of wine. Okay. Now the flavor from the barrel of wine is going to absorb, right? But the wine is shel truma. Problem is the ayin here is the wine is truma. Rabbi Meir Oser, Rabbi Meir says it's prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda Matir, Rabbi Yehuda says it's permissible. Rabbi Yossi Matir b'shel chitin ve'oser b'shel se'orin. But Rabbi Yossi says wheat is okay, but barley bread is not okay. Why? Because barley is much more absorbent than wheat. As everybody knows, when you make your cholent, you got to add a lot of water. The barley is very absorbent. My love, you'd say this three-way argument is on the following topic. One says smell is something, right? So therefore, since smell is something, therefore the absorbed wine is an issue, right? The absorbed wine is going to be a problem. Umar Savar, the other opinion, says recha veloklum, that smell is nothing. So therefore, absorbing the flavor of the wine into the bread is irrelevant. So, and then of course you've got Rabbi Yossi who makes a distinction and says it's sometimes relevant, sometimes not relevant, depending on how absorbent the bread is. L'Rava, so Rava says Vadai Tanahi. Rava says for sure you're right, right? That's exactly what's going on. There's an argument whether its flavor is absorbed, whether flavor is not absorbed, and I hold like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Meir, which is convenient. The halachas can be like it, right? Abaye says Milei Matanaim. Abaye says doesn't have to be an argument, right? Amar Lach Abaye says Lav mi itmar Allah. Didn't we talk about this and say Amar Rabba Bar Chana? Rabba Bar Chana said Amar Reish Lakish. Bepas chama vechavis psucha divrei hakol asura. If you've got hot bread and you've got an open wine container, then that for sure is prohibited according to everybody, right? So therefore, Abaye's point is proven. The flavor is absorbent, right? That's for sure prohibited. And he says everybody in the Mishnah would agree that's absorbing and that's prohibited. Bepas sonenis vechavis megufa. If the bread is cold and the barrel is closed, divrakul muteris, then everybody agrees that it's not absorbing anything, right? The question is, how absorbent is it? Lo nechleku elo bepaschama v'chavis megufa. The question is only if you've got warm bread on a closed barrel, is there flavor for it to absorb or not? The pas sonenes, also cold bread v'chavis psucha, and an open barrel. Right? V'hadidi nami kepaschama v'chavis pesucha dami. But my case that he was discussing, he says my case where they smell from the wine, That's like having an open container and warm bread, right? Then it's absorbent, and that's why I hold that as prohibited according to everybody. So that's how Abai words that Mishnah. Okay, Ze'aklal. Here's the rule. In the Mishnah says, Kol shebahanasu benosein tam. If it gives a positive flavor, so then it's going to prohibit it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda said in Shmuel, Hachi hilchasa. That is the halacha, right? The halacha is nosein tam lifgam is permissible, right? If it gives a negative flavor, if the flavor is negative, right? Notwithstanding the circumstance, we said that there might be one crazy person who likes bad flavors, right? We don't follow that person. Nosein tam lifgam, because bad flavor, it's permissible. Right. Right? This situation where you've got vinegar falling on beans, the beans have to be hot. You get some nice vinegar falling on hot beans, that's gross. But if you've got some vinegar falling on some cold beans, then you've got bean salad. Right? And that's nice. People like some vinegar on their beans, cold beans.
And that would be what would be also?
That's permissible.
That's permissible.
No, I'm sorry, that would be prohibited.
Right.
That would be also because that's a good flavor, right? So
right.
therefore, it's only permissible when it falls on the hot beans. Now, if it falls on the cold beans, they're tichon, and then he heats it up afterwards. Nasa kemishish biach ulevasos pagam v'aser. Then you have to consider it that the vinegar first helped the beans, and then then you heated it up and made it taste bad. And that's why it's prohibited, right? Because it became prohibited first, then you just heated up prohibited items, right? That's why that's different. The chain, and similarly, he also Rabin. When Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, Amar Rabbi Barchana, and they were Rabbi Barchana, Amar B'Yochanan, Lo shanu elo shenafel l'toch grisin roastin. The permissibility is only when the vinegar falls on hot beans, right? Ava, nafel l'toch grisin snonin. However, if it goes like this, the vinegar falls on cold beans. That's the phrase. 2 beans. That means that makes it better, right? Vehir sichon, and then you heated it up. Nasa kamishish biach ulevazov pagam. It's as though you first made it good, and then you ruined it. Va'aser, and now it's prohibited. V'chein ki aser Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came from yes.
Wait, if
vinegar falls on cold beans, that's beneficial.
Right.
Therefore, it's prohibited.
Could you just rinse the beans and throw it
Yes.
out? Right.
At that point, you could, as long as they're not the type of beans that
are cut open,
that have cuts in them. Right. Then you have an absorption issue. Right.
Okay.
He also Rav Dimi when Rav Dimi came from Israel. That's exactly what they used to do. Erev Shabbos and Tzipori. The Kornosom Shechlayim, they called it cress. That was their bean salad. They used to make a nice bean salad Erev Shabbos, and it was no problem, right?
I was about to say before, it's what they serve at Bali Laughing.